My name is Helen Marston, and I was 66 years old when I discovered the one truth I never expected to find in my family, that even the people who preach unity can be the ones who hide the deepest fractures. I grew up believing my mother, Elaine, was the moral compass of our family. She was the woman who held hands at the dinner table and insisted we speak openly about everything, finances included. "We're one family, no secrets," she would say, tapping her wedding ring lightly against the wooden table as if sealing a pact. My sister, Rebecca, and I absorbed that philosophy our entire lives. Whenever tensions rose, over chores, over boys, over our wildly different personalities, Mom diffused it with that same sentence. She repeated it through childhood, through adolescence, and through the early years of our adulthood when financial strain first entered our world like an unwelcome guest. We believed her. Why wouldn't we? She made transparency sound like the foundation of love itself. When my father died unexpectedly from a heart condition, everything changed. Not drastically at first, just small things. Mom became more guarded. She handled the estate paperwork alone. She waved us away when we tried to help sort the financial documents. And when I gently asked if we could review Dad's accounts together, she smiled that tight, practiced smile and said, "Don't worry, sweetheart. Everything is taken care of." I should have questioned it more. I should have pushed. But grief makes you compliant. It softens your suspicion. And I trusted her more than I trusted myself. Years passed. Mom aged gracefully, though her voice hardened when finances were mentioned. Whenever Rebecca and I offered to help with bills or repairs, she insisted on managing things herself. "I know how to stretch $1, she would say. "Your father taught me well." Still, I noticed inconsistencies. Bills paid late despite her claiming everything was fine. Old letters she hid quickly when I entered a room. A nervousness whenever the mailman delivered anything marked official. But I told myself she was just overwhelmed. After all, she lived alone, and independence was woven into her bones. Everything might have remained buried if not for the day I stopped by unexpectedly with groceries. Mom was out on a walk, and while waiting, I placed the bags on her kitchen counter. One slipped and tumbled, apples rolling across the floor. As I bent to pick them up, I noticed a drawer slightly ajar, not unusual, except that a thick envelope peeked out, bearing the name of the bank my father once used. A dusty bank envelope. One I had never seen before. One deliberately tucked out of view. I'm not proud of what I did next. Curiosity and unease overpowered my restraint. I opened the drawer fully and pulled out the envelope. Inside was a statement, only 3 months old, for an account I had never heard of. An account with 2 names listed. My mother's, and Rebecca's. Mine was nowhere. At that moment, the world shifted. The sentence Mom had repeated my entire life, "We're one family, no secrets," suddenly felt like a cruel joke. And as I heard her footsteps returning to the house, the envelope still trembling in my hands, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. My family did have secrets. Big ones. And I had just uncovered the first crack. I slipped the envelope back into the drawer just seconds before my mother walked in. She greeted me warmly at first, but her eyes darted toward the counter, toward the drawer, and I saw it, a flicker of panic. It told me everything. "Ellie, sweetheart," she said, setting down her purse, "this is a nice surprise." But her gaze kept drifting back to that drawer. I could practically feel the tension radiating from her. We made small talk while I helped her put away the groceries. She fussed over the fruit, grateful for the gesture, yet distracted. My heart pounded. I thought of the account, her name, Rebecca's name, the missing third name that should have been mine. Finally, she excused herself to use the restroom. The moment she left the kitchen, I heard her footsteps change. She wasn't heading to the hallway bathroom. She was heading straight for that drawer. I stood silently in the doorway as she pulled it open, flipped through the stack of envelopes, and exhaled in relief when she found the one I had moved mere inches. She didn't even close the drawer, just clutched the envelope in both hands, shoulders sagging as if bracing for impact. "Mom," I said quietly. She spun around. The guilt in her eyes was undeniable. "Helen, honey, you startled me." I looked at the envelope in her hands. What is that? Her lips tightened. Nothing you need to worry about. A line I had heard before. Too many times. Why is there an account with your name and Rebecca's? I asked softly. Why wasn't I included? Her face drained of color. She placed the envelope on the table as if setting down a weapon she no longer wanted to hold. It's complicated, she whispered. That's not an answer. She hesitated long enough for me to feel the space between us widen, like a chasm opening under years of unspoken truths. I set that account up after your father died, she finally said. For certain expenses. What expenses? She didn't reply. Mom, we were supposed to handle everything together, I pressed. You always said we were one family. No secrets. Why didn't you tell me about this? Tears filled her eyes, but she wiped them away quickly, shaking her head. Helen, please don't make this difficult. And Rebecca knows? The two of you talk about this? Yes, she admitted softly. She knows. And I don't. Her silence answered for her. It was the kind of silence that doesn't just hide truth, it confirms betrayal. Why her? I finally whispered. Why not me? My mother looked at me with a sadness I didn't understand. Then she delivered the line that would haunt me for days. You've always been the strong one, Helen. I knew you would be fine. Fine? Left out? Cut off? Strength was suddenly a punishment I had never agreed to. Before I could say anything more, she placed a hand on my arm and whispered. Some things were not meant for all of us to know. That sentence cracked something deep within me. And it drove me toward the truth with a determination I didn't know I still possessed. To understand the weight behind my mother's secrecy, I had to revisit the past, the years after my father died, the choices my mother made, and the invisible strings that had tied Rebecca and me to very different roles in the family. Growing up, Rebecca was the fragile one. The emotional one. The one who cried easily and crumbled under pressure. Mom coddled her constantly, making excuses for her shortcomings. She's sensitive, she'd say. She needs more support. Be patient with your sister. Meanwhile, I was the dependable one. The girl who finished her chores before being asked. The student who worked part-time jobs to ease financial strain. The daughter who absorbed responsibility like a sponge, quietly, efficiently, without praise. You're strong, Helen, Mom used to say. You don't need as much guidance. She meant it as a compliment. But over time, it became permission, for her to lean on me more, demand more, expect more. When Dad died, the imbalance grew. Rebecca fell apart emotionally, grieving loudly and publicly. Mom, already shaken, poured all her energy into supporting her. And me? I handled the funeral arrangements. The estate paperwork. The insurance transfers. The bills. Things my mother should have been part of, but she was too busy holding Rebecca together. I didn't blame her then. But now, in hindsight, I saw that those early patterns had shaped everything. Mom viewed Rebecca as someone who needed protecting. She viewed me as someone who could handle anything alone, even betrayal. Still, I had never imagined she would hide finances from me. Money wasn't just currency. In families, it was trust. So I needed to know, what was she hiding? How long had she been hiding it? Why did Rebecca know and not me? When Rebecca and I were younger, Mom had always said that any inheritance would be split equally. Fairness above all, she used to preach. No favorites. But this secret account told a different story. A story where one daughter was chosen and the other overlooked. After leaving Mom's house, I drove home in a fog. Memories churned in my mind, the birthdays where Mom gave Rebecca the more expensive gifts, because she needed confidence, the way Mom defended her every mistake while expecting me to clean up my own, the moments when Mom praised my strength without ever considering the cost. And now? Now there was a financial secret decades in the making. A hidden account. A missing name. A lie wrapped in the sentiment of family unity. I realized something important, my mother didn't see her secrecy as betrayal. She saw it as protection. Protection for Rebecca. But where did that leave me? The strong one? The self-sufficient one? the daughter who was supposed to be fine. That mindset had allowed a secret to grow unchecked for years. And I knew, if my mother had gone this far, then the truth behind that account was deeper than a simple oversight. It was intentional. And I was determined to dig until I found the entire truth. The next morning, I did what I had done my whole life when faced with a problem: I gathered information. I began by calling the bank listed on the envelope. I knew they wouldn't disclose details without proper authorization, so I started carefully. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I'm calling regarding a family account. My mother is listed as a holder, and there may be an issue with missing documentation." "Are you on the account?" the representative asked. "No," I said. "But I need to understand why." The representative couldn't tell me specifics, but she did confirm something crucial: the account had been opened 23 years ago. 23 years. Long before Rebecca's financial troubles. Long before my father died. The revelation chilled me. This wasn't a reaction to grief. This wasn't a last-minute decision. This was intentional planning. But planning for what? I drove to the county courthouse next. Property records, estate filings, probate documents, anything that might reveal discrepancies. And I found one. A small note buried in my father's old probate paperwork indicated that he intended for all assets to be split equally between his daughters, but only if Mom honored the agreement. The estate had been transferred to Mom solely, under the assumption that she would manage it fairly. She had signed a document acknowledging this. And then, sometime afterward, she had opened the secret account excluding me. My chest tightened. This wasn't just favoritism. It was a breach of trust between my parents. And between my mother and me. My next stop was my sister's house. Rebecca answered the door with tired eyes, as if she hadn't slept. She didn't greet me. She simply stepped aside. "You talked to Mom," she said flatly. "I did," I replied. "Now it's your turn." She sat at her kitchen table, fingers twisting nervously. "This is going to hurt you." "That depends on what the truth is." Rebecca swallowed. "The account, it was set up for me. For emergencies. Mom said you didn't need it." My throat tightened. "So it is an inheritance." "It's more than that," she whispered. "It has almost everything Dad left." The room spun. "What?" I whispered. She nodded miserably. "Mom said she had to protect me. She said you'd be fine." The phrase again. "You'll be fine." "You've always thought I judged you," I said softly. "But I never have. I only ever worried." Her voice trembled. "You bought the house because you thought I'd need it someday." I nodded. "Yes. Partly. And partly because I needed a stable investment. I never meant for our lives to collide this way." She sank slowly into a chair. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "I didn't realize how much of my resentment was my own." I sat across from her. "We both made assumptions. But now we can rebuild honestly." Her voice broke. "I'm behind on rent. I didn't want you to know. I didn't want you to think less of me." "I don't," I said gently. She covered her face, crying quietly. The truth had finally surfaced, messy, painful, but honest. Now came the moment that would determine everything. "Let me help you," I said. "Not by controlling you. Not by rescuing you. Just by supporting you fairly." She lowered her hands, eyes shining with something I hadn't seen in years. Maybe I need that," she said. "Helping someone is easy when they ask for it. Helping someone who has spent their whole life resenting your stability is an entirely different challenge. So before I made any commitments, I needed to set boundaries, clear, firm, and respectful. For both of us." "Marjorie," I began, "we need to talk about what support actually means. Not fantasies. Not assumptions. The truth." She wiped her eyes. "Okay." I placed 2 documents in front of her. Option 1, I become your direct landlord, not the company. We rewrite the lease at a fair rate, you pay what I originally approved. No more. No less. She nodded slowly. Option 2, I continued, you stay here temporarily at a reduced rate until you get back on your feet. A few months. Not a lifetime. And then you transition into the normal rent. Her brows furrowed. You do that for me? I would do that for my sister, I said. Not for a tenant. For family. She exhaled shakily. What's option 3? Option 3, I said carefully, is the hardest. You move out. We protect our relationship by giving each other space. She looked stricken. You'd really let me walk away? If staying here would fill you with resentment or shame, then walking away might be healthier. She stared at the table. For years, Marjorie had built her identity on being the more carefree sister, the one who lived while I counted pennies. But now, she was confronted with the reality that her choices had consequences. And that my choices, quiet, disciplined, unremarkable, had created a foundation she suddenly needed. Finally, she whispered, I want option 1. I want to do this right. I don't want handouts. I nodded. Then we'll move forward honestly. But there was still one thing we needed to face, one truth we had avoided for decades. Marjorie, I said softly, I need to know why you've always believed I judged you. She looked away. Because you never needed help. And I always did. It made me feel like I was failing. You weren't failing, I said. You were just living differently. She shook her head. No. I was careless. And you were responsible. I hated seeing your life work out because it reminded me mine wasn't. The honesty startled me. She had never spoken like this, not once in 64 years. And buying this house? It terrified me, she continued. Because it meant you were once again doing something I couldn't. Something I never prepared for. And it made me feel like the little sister, not the older one. Suddenly, her anger made sense. All of it. Every joke. Every resentment. Every accusation. I never wanted to one-up you, I said. I just wanted to feel safe. And I wanted to feel equal, she whispered. We sat in silence, two sisters on opposite sides of a lifetime of misunderstanding. Then she said, I'm ready to fix this. Really fix it. And so was I. The weeks that followed were a quiet, steady transformation, both of the house and of our relationship. First, I severed ties with the rental company. They pushed back, but the contract violations made it easy. Once they were gone, the tension in Marjorie's home lifted noticeably. She stopped flinching every time she opened the mailbox. Next, we rewrote her lease at a fair rate. She insisted on paying the full amount I originally set, refusing discounts or favoritism. I admired her for that. It was her way of reclaiming dignity. But the biggest change wasn't financial. It was emotional. For the first time in our lives, we talked, really talked, about everything. About her failed marriages. About my grief after Daniel. About the childhood roles that had shaped us both without our consent. About the jealousy she carried like a hidden bruise. About the loneliness I had masked with work. Marjorie began budgeting for the first time in her life. She showed me her spreadsheet proudly, like a child bringing home a perfect test score. I'm learning, she'd say, laughing nervously. I know, I'd reply. And I'm proud of you. She took part-time work at a community center. She started painting again, a hobby she had abandoned decades ago. And slowly, joy returned to her life in ways that had nothing to do with money. One evening, she invited me to her house for dinner. It was the first time she had cooked for me in years. As we sat at her small kitchen table, she looked around the room thoughtfully. You know, she said, I used to feel ashamed living here. Because I thought it meant you were rescuing me again. She paused. But now, it feels like home. It is your home, I said. I'm just the one who signs the paperwork. She smiled, but then her expression softened. You know what the real consequence of all this is? What? I finally see you clearly. I frowned. What do you mean? I always told myself you were obsessed with money, she said. But really, you were obsessed with stability. And I mocked you for it because I didn't know how to create it for myself. Her honesty stunned me. And the truth, she finished softly. You didn't buy this house to control me. You bought it because you're the kind of person who builds safety where others build chaos. I felt something warm settle in my chest, a kind of healing I hadn't expected. But the consequences weren't just emotional. They were practical too. Because one day, as Marjorie and I stood outside tending the small backyard garden, she said something that changed everything. Lorraine. I want to buy this house from you someday. I stared at her, surprised. Really? Yes. Not now. Not soon. But eventually. She smiled gently. I want to prove to myself that I can build something too. That I can own something I worked for. The words brought tears to my eyes. Because after a lifetime of imbalance, resentment, and misunderstanding, my sister finally wanted to stand beside me, not behind me. Months later, I stood in the early morning sunlight on Marjorie's porch, sipping tea as she watered her flowers. The neighborhood was quiet, the air cool, the world slow and gentle. In that moment, the house didn't feel like an investment. It didn't feel like leverage. It didn't feel like a secret keeping us apart. It felt like a bridge. A bridge I hadn't even realized we needed. Marjorie turned to me and smiled. A real smile, open, unguarded, free of defensiveness. You know, she said, I used to think you chased money because you were afraid of life. She paused. But now I think you understood life better than I did. You prepared for storms instead of pretending the skies would stay clear. I laughed softly. And I used to think you were reckless. But now I think you were brave. You gave yourself permission to want things I was too cautious to want. She lowered the watering can. We weren't wrong, you know. Just incomplete. We stood in quiet reflection, two women who had lived parallel lives without realizing how much they needed each other. I thought about all the nights I stayed up organizing finances, believing I was alone. And all the nights she cried over impulsive decisions, believing she had no support. Our entire relationship had been shaped by misunderstanding. Now, finally, we had clarity. Lorraine, she said, her voice tender, thank you for not giving up on me. I never could, I said. You're my sister. She nodded. And I'm yours. The morning light caught her face, softening the years etched into it. I realized then that healing doesn't always come through apologies or grand gestures. Sometimes it comes through small truths spoken quietly over time. Before I left, she handed me a small envelope. What's this? I asked. A savings plan, she said proudly. My savings plan. I started it last month. Emotional warmth spread through my chest. She added, you inspired me. And I want to prove, to myself more than anyone, that I can build something too. I hugged her. Not a polite hug. A real one. As I drove home, I reflected on everything we had been through. The misunderstandings, the resentment, the arguments, the fear. And the healing that grew from truth. If there's a lesson in my story, it's this. People often judge what they don't understand. Pride can turn family into strangers. And silence can create battles no one ever intended to fight. But understanding, real, honest understanding, can rebuild what you thought was lost. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Has family misunderstanding ever shaped your life in unexpected ways? I'm listening.